Welcome everybody, my name is Martijn van Bodegom. I'm a product manager here at Evonik, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this CM44 IP firmware upgrade webinar. We have some exciting stuff to tell you about, and I'll dive into the details later on. So first of all, let's get our PowerPoint up and running. There we go. To start off with, we are using our webinar software, so please make use of it by asking any questions that you might have in our chat or Q&A session. You'll find the buttons on the side of your screen, so please do feel free to ask any questions, and as far as we can, we'll try to answer these directly as well. So today we'll be talking about the CM44 and specifically the IP upgrade that we've given this camera. To start off with, we'll be talking about a little bit an introduction about Evonik. There might be people here that have not heard of us before and are just new to us as a company. Then we'll tell a little bit about the details on the CM44, not too much because we're basically all looking at the control options. Then we have some additional features that might be useful for this camera, and we'll also quickly tap onto our USB extender. Let's start off. So Evonik is a company founded about 13 years ago. We are a manufacturer of PTZ cameras, so that's the core business of what we do. We do product design, manufacturing, warehouse, sales and support, all from the Netherlands. We have a focus on Pro AV installations, so fixed installations is mainly what we are designing our cameras for, but of course our cameras are always used in different applications as well. We're not limited to that. And we are distributed in over about 30 countries in basically every continent on the world at the moment. So this is the CM44 camera. This is what it's all about. It's our video conferencing camera. As you can see, it has only a USB 2.0 output, so no SDI, no HDMI on this camera. It's really specific for this type of application. It only has USB 2.0 output. On the other side, it is a full-blown PTZ camera, so it has all the features that you might expect on a PTZ camera. It has high-quality optics, so it gives a pristine video quality, and it has an 83.7 wide-angle 5x optical zoom lens, which makes this a great camera for relatively close distances, but still the 5x optical zoom allows you to zoom into a person sitting slightly further away, still maintaining all the detail that you might want to capture. So we have a USB 2.0 output, as I touched on before, and in this specific webinar we'll be touching a little bit more up on the remote control over serial and IP, which has been added. So these kind of cameras, they are used in small up to medium-sized video conferencing rooms or small studios like the one we are using right now for this webinar. It's very easy. You simply hook up the camera to your PC with either OBS or vMix or any other software that you want to use, and you're good to go. No complicated capture cards are needed or anything else. It's as simple as that, plug and play basically. So for this particular camera, which kind of separates it from the competition in this market segment, especially if you look at the price point of this camera, is that this camera is a full-blown PTZ camera, and it comes with all the control options that you might wish. So it already had the RS232 and RS485 serial control options over wired connections, VCUC. It had IP. We've added IP control to this camera, and on top of that you also have the UVC control, which is based on the USB video class. So to start off with, this is the kind of cable that you would want to use with the RS232 connectors. I've highlighted the connectors here on the side. This is the connector that you want to use for RS232. So the specifics of this connector allow you to loop to the next camera and to the next camera. So it has an input and an output. So you can hook up to 7 cameras using RS232 and the VCUC control protocol. So when you look at the RS485, you see a different kind of wire is used. It's a very basic twisted wire with 2 wires. You hook it up to the RS485 connector right there on the back of the camera. It comes with a captive screw connector which you can easily attach the wire to. The upside of this kind of cable is that it can run tremendous long distances, so even up to 1.2 kilometers you can use this cable. Make sure that you have the right quality cable, but if you have one of those, you can get long distances from one point to another using RS485, so very convenient in that sense. Newly added onto this camera with the latest firmware is the IP control. Still, it's the same protocol, so it's still VCUC, but now you can transmit it over IP as well, making it sometimes easier to install because you don't need any specific wires. You can use the standard Cat6 cables that are already being drawn into the building or are simply already there. So it makes it easier to integrate in that sense. And finally, you can still control this camera over USB using the UVC protocols, which I'll explain slightly more in detail later on. So this is the serial command list, or at least a snippet from it, with the pan tilt drive commands. As you can see here, these are the kind of commands that you'll be sending over a serial connection, RS232, RS485. And it starts with 8X. Now for serial connections, you'd need to change the X into the value that you've set your camera to. The X is the VCUC ID, which you can set in the camera. So if you go into the on-screen display of the camera, for example, or in the web GUI, you can set its ID, and this is how you differentiate on serial connections between one camera and another. So the first camera is 8.1, the second camera will be 8.2, third camera 8.3, etc., up to 8.7, which is the maximum ID in VCUC. So it's really straightforward. You can download many free tools for serial transmission. You download one of those, you copy and paste these commands, you replace the values with the ones that you want, you send it to the camera, and the camera will respond to that. Very straightforward. So now we've added the IP firmware. So what changed? Basically, we've added IP control onto a camera that was already competitive and made it even more competitive, and allows you to install it in a wider range of applications as well. It's been an update. Let's go back, skipping there a couple of pages. From firmware version 2.5.2 and upwards, we've added the specific IP control. So you can check the firmware version in your camera's web GUI. If you have version 2.5.2 or higher, then you are good to go and you can control this camera over IP. So let's dive into a little bit more detail how to update a camera like this, because many of you might not even have hold one of these cameras in your hands and you have no clue how to do this. So I'll quickly do this live. So let me switch quickly to my camera. There we are. And let's get myself out of the way so you can clearly see what I'm doing. So this is the web interface of our camera. So let me log out real quick. This is what you would see if you simply go to the IP address of the camera. You log in with the standard admin, unless you've changed it already. You navigate to the system tab. You go to update. Here you can see the camera versions. So please have a look at the camera version itself. So like I said, from version 2.5.2 and upwards, the camera can be controlled over IP. So this camera already received the update, but just to show you how it works, you click on update, you select these two files which are available on www.evonik.eu. Simply find the CM44 camera on our webpage, and right there you'll find the firmware as well to download. Once you download it, it comes in a zip file. Unpack that file and choose one of these files to update, and once one of these has finished updating, choose the other one and update it as well. So it's a two-step update basically. Simply select this file and click on upgrade. There is no right or wrong order in updating these firmwares, so it doesn't matter whether you first flash the ARM or the UVC. It simply refers to the MCU, this version, and the camera version. For this camera. So that's really straightforward. Press upgrade. The camera will do a reboot after updating, and once it is finished, log in again and update the other file. And that's all there is to it. It's very straightforward. Okay, let's get back to my presentation. There we are. Okay, now let's move forward. So again, Fiscal Over IP. So we've just touched upon the Fiscal Over serial, and this is Fiscal Over IP. As you can see, the commands are exactly the same. No surprise there because it's the same protocol. But one thing you need to keep in mind, where with the Fiscal Over serial, you would have to change the 8X into 81, 82, 83 or 84, depending on the Fiscal address of the camera. It doesn't apply any longer for the Fiscal Over IP controls, because the unique identifier in this case is the IP address of the camera itself. So you're sending this command only to a single IP address, so you don't need the identifier of Fiscal for the camera to know whether or not it should respond to a command. So with Fiscal Over IP, the 8X is by default always 81. So make sure you keep that in mind. Over serial, you need to use the Fiscal identifier, and over IP, you need to use just the first one, 81. That's all. That's the only thing you need to remember on that sense, on that part. So again, you need to send the hexadecimal commands, as I've shown you before. Always start with 81 over IP, and the serial address is replaced by the IP address. So that's the main difference between sending commands over Fiscal, over serial and over IP. So the port which you need to address is by default 1259. You can set this, however, in the web interface to something else if it's required on your local network. And the last bit of it is that you can have you have to choose either UDP or TCP to transmit these commands. Now, both are possible. Some networks allow UDP over TCP, or there are some restrictions on the network, so that allows you to choose between whatever works. Preferably you would use TCP, simply because over TCP you can also receive the acknowledgements from the camera. So once you send a command, the camera will respond, "I've received it." And once it's finished executing this command, it will again give you the feedback that it is finished actually. So you can use this in your control systems to wait till a camera is in the right position and then switch to the video of that particular camera, for example. On UDP, you do not get any feedback from the camera, simply because the camera doesn't know where the command came from and can't respond in that sense. It's a limitation in the protocol. So by default, I would say use TCP, but if it's prohibited on the local network, you can revert back to UDP. That's the way I would approach it in this case. Again, we have a couple of specific applications which are now capable with IP control. So they're in a lot of more elaborate installations where there are large companies, for example, they have a lot of automation in their rooms when it comes to lighting or sunshades, screen control, audio control, etc., etc. So what you find in these kind of applications is that there are multi-camera setups which need to be addressed, and then it's really convenient to do this over IP because the cameras can be placed in different locations of the room. You just route them back to a single router or switch, and you can control both of them from a single point anywhere else in the building. So multi-camera systems are really a great application to be used with Fiscal Over IP. But it doesn't need to always be so elaborate. It can also be very simple. You can use a very simple 4-button IP control panel. You can have a look at Needs, N-E-E-T-S. It's one of our technology partners. They make great control panels which you can look up. Very simple for the end user, because now they can simply press a single button and they'll be getting their preferred presets called on the camera. So the camera goes into the right position for this particular meeting. So if you have a small meeting, you might want to zoom in a little bit and only capture these 2 people on one side of the room. But if there's 4 or more people in the room, you want to zoom out and center the camera to make sure that everybody is there. So you can just program 2 presets, small meeting, large meeting, and it's very easy for the customer and the end user to understand, because we really need to keep that in mind, how the end user is experiencing all the technology. It doesn't need to be complicated in that sense for them. Another great combination is, of course, with our own CON300 IP controller, which allows you to control up to 255 cameras in total over IP. Then there are all the room control systems, which I already quickly explained. Simply turn on a room into video conferencing mode, where the sunshades go slightly darker, the light is turned brighter, so you can have everybody clearly visible in the room, which makes it easier for a camera, of course. The screen goes on, audio is already being enabled, the microphone is being turned on, and the preferred software that is running on the PC is started. All with a single button control, and the camera just goes along with that. And of course the last one is a far end control within the same building. So this is a little bit more complex to understand, but let's say you have an interrogation room, for example, which is equipped with one of our cameras, and you want to control this not from within that room but from a different location, simply because you don't want any control system in an interrogation room where somebody who is interrogating has to play around with the joystick to get the right shot. No, you want somebody else in the building who is not involved with the actual interrogation to control the camera. So this way you can simply hook up the camera to the Ethernet within the building, and from any other room where they can access the same network, you can now control the camera remotely. So it's very simple to route cables this way. Another application, which is mostly for the large corporate clients, something that they really like, is where you have a company where you have 10, 50, 100 video conferencing rooms. And you can make up the number, it doesn't really matter in that sense. They all have their own controller, so the end user can set their own presets, for example, but the IT department also has one of the controllers. So in case that the end user has some issue with the camera, for example, or it can't get it in the right position, or somebody has tampered around with it, you can now have the IT department log in to this camera remotely, give it a reboot if necessary using the web interface, or use one of the controllers to get it into the right position, give it the right focus, without the need for a support guy to run down to the room, which could be floors away, 10, 20 floors down to the room, trying to fix it physically. No, you can now just log in remotely, reboot the camera, set it in the right position, and the end user is good to go much faster than it used to before. So this is really an application that is really convenient for a lot of large companies. So that's the IP part. Now let's dive into UVC, which is also a very interesting way of controlling your camera, and to be honest, you've all been working with it for quite some time already. You might not know it, but you have. UVC is the USB video class, that's what it stands for, and it's built into Windows, macOS, Linux, FreeBSD and PS3 and many other devices already. It's basically a default driver which is already provided with the operating system. This makes it very easy that only we as a manufacturer have to make sure that our camera has it built in on our side, but if it has, then it can simply communicate with a computer. This might be a familiar screen for you guys, Skype, who haven't used it or cursed it before. This is a real application of UVC. The camera is being connected over USB, it's being recognized as a webcam, and it shows up in your application without the need for any drivers or configuration on your side. Simply plug and play and the video is there. Now, some of you might remember this screen as well. It was more present in the older Windows versions. It's still present in Windows 10, slightly more hidden from where you can find it easily, but this is UVC Control. So UVC allows you to transmit video, but it also allows you to control the camera basically. And even this screen, if you hook it up with our camera, you can control the pan, the tilt, the zoom of the camera. So it makes it very easy for applications to tap into that. If the application has this built in, and then it can use these commands to control the camera. One thing to keep in mind when doing USB, the video quality really depends on the application that is being used. So the software application running on your PC is the one who is requesting a certain resolution from the camera. So even though you might set your camera up to do 1080p 30, if your application only allows up to 720p, the camera will scale down to 720p and transmit that signal over USB. So the application you're running on your computer is leading in that sense. So don't be surprised that you might manually set the camera to 1080p 30, but all of a sudden you notice that your application is only receiving 720p 30 instead. This is all done within the UVC protocol. The application requests a certain resolution, and that's it. The camera will have to obey. So there's no way around that. One typical UVC control application here is zoom rooms. Of course, you have the video, but also you have camera control built in, and our cameras work fine with the zoom rooms application. We have a couple of test setups here as well, and it works just fine. Simply hook up the camera, it's being recognized by the application through the UVC protocol, it receives its video, and you can control the camera. So one of the things that we get asked about a lot is why we use USB 2.0 on our cameras. Why not use USB 3.0, which allows you for much higher bandwidth, maybe better video quality, etc., etc. The main reason about that is that USB 3.0 is notoriously hard to extend. There are applications out there, there are devices out there which can, but usually they're well, in the price range above €1,000, $1,000, and more, and much more if you keep looking further. And even then there are some issues with the USB feed being interrupted, and then if you know what happens with Skype, if you unplug your camera, it will take a while before it is back up and running. So that's really something you want to stay clear from. So our main reason for USB 2.0 is because it's easy to extend. So in how many of your fixed installation is it so that the camera is really close to your computer, because USB cable can run maybe up to 5 meters if you have a high quality one, but any longer than that and your signal is getting interrupted. So many applications require longer cable distances, and it's much easier to extend USB 2.0, and it's much cheaper. So if you have a look at our AV-UX150 USB 2.0 extender, you can extend up to 50 meters using a standard CAT cable. So it has two RJ45 connectors on the other side. Simply run a CAT cable between the two and you can extend it up to 50 meters without any hassle. As you can see on the transmitter side or receiver side, USB is two ways, so it's both actually. You can see it has two USB ports, so you can hook up one of our cameras, for example, in combination with a touchscreen, for example. And just with a single CAT cable you can run both of these signals back to the computer, so it makes it really simple to do the touch interfacing between the screen and the computer, and also allows you to hook up our camera in. So this is a very, very convenient solution, much cheaper as the USB 3.0 extenders I mentioned before. The list price of this device is around somewhere 140 euros, so you can see how much it differs between USB 2.0 and 3.0. So this was a real quick overview of all the changes, but also the different control options that you might have on our CM44 camera. If you do have any questions, please continue to send them in the chat as well, as long as this webinar is still running. But also feel free to send us an email and let us know what questions you have. So after this webinar, I'll make sure to recap all the questions that have been asked in the chat and the Q&A, and we'll send a recap over email to all of your emails. There is another webinar available in April, so we're almost at the end of this month already. So next week I'll be hosting the CON300 IP training, which will be a little bit more technical. I'll be really diving into how to set up this controller and the things that you can do with it. So if you haven't signed up for that webinar, please do. You can find the sign up form at www.evonik.eu/webinar. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure to host this meeting, and looking forward to see you soon next week with our Con 300 webinar. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.